Hey, welcome to the channel. So before I get started, we are talking about Metallica. I know how you people are, so I want to profess that I did not write this. I found it interesting and I'm sharing it with you. So before you go haywire in the comments and telling me that I'm going to burn in hell for all eternity for casting aspersions upon one of your favorite Metallica songs, this is just an article. This is actually a cold read. I've yet to read it. I just found the title interesting. Now we will move forward. 10 of the worst Metallica songs ever made. Yes, let's go ahead and invite the hate and let's get started. The worst Metallica songs can be a tricky topic because of the band's different eras. This band has come up with multiple records with a wide variety of styles. Granted, most people prefer their 80s output, but even those have some weaker tracks. However, it also highlights Metallica's massive career and the many ups and downs they have gone through. It's also worth pointing out that this list is very subjective. Every single fan has their own version of the worst Metallica songs. Furthermore, this is done from a place of respect. It is only meant to portray some tracks that don't live up to the band's legacy. Metallica's great, but even the legendary band can have a few misses. Here's a look at 10 of them and why these songs are the way they are. And just to preface my intro, I do not agree with their first take. But let's go. The track Escape. This can begin by including a song that could generate controversy. Escape has a very serious problem, and that is that it is one of the best albums in the history of heavy metal. Moreover, possibly the best Metallica album, being surrounded by songs like Fight Fire with Fire, For Whom the Bell Tolls, Creeping Death, or Fade to Black is difficult. Without really being a bad song on an album that has so much, Escape does not convince. So it's just in relation to the album, and even Metallica, I think, relate that to the song Escape. It clashes considerably with the overwhelming quality of Ride the Lightning. There is no denying that this track has its defenders, but it is mostly criticized. It makes sense when considering that's part of such a legendary record, definitely a prime example of the worst Metallica songs. Again, I disagree. Shoot Me Again. And speaking of controversy, now we go with a song from the controversial and polarizing Saint Anger. With this album, Metallica moved away, in some think too far, from the sound that characterized them with their beginning, something that did not happen overnight, but rather happened progressively. The album has things that fans of the band did not like, and to this day still do not like. They consider that, for example, the drums sound like a garbage can, which is fair enough. Furthermore, it does not include solos, or the raw production ends up sounding unprofessional. Well, Shoot Me Again embodies all those elements that not only make it the worst of a not very good album by the band, but also one of the worst Metallica songs, and this I agree. It is a poor song from a very negative part of the group's history. Here's one I do not agree with. 3, Don't Tread on Me. The Black Album is a mix of songs that achieved great commercial success without being great songs with much less recognition. Make of that what you will. In the first group, Enter Sandman and Nothing Else Matters stand out. In the second, The Unforgiven, Wolf and Man, Wherever I May Roam. Don't Tread on Me is somewhere in the middle, very inconsequential, which makes it a little irrelevant. Like Escape, it is a song that never quite gels. That I disagree with. Back in the day, it was the end of side 1, and I fucking love it. The album as a whole was a massive hit, but some songs highlight a painful transition. The writing sessions and war with producer Bob Rock at the time had become legendary. It makes sense that some songs never worked in these productions. It's also ironic that one of the worst Metallica songs came from such a successful album. However, it makes a lot of sense that given the context of the band's moment at the time. And here's the thing, Don't Tread on Me, I honestly thought the weakest song on the album was actually When Nothing Else Matters. I mean, it's alright. It really is. I thought the standout tracks, personally, were Of Wolf and Man and Don't Tread on Me and Through the Never, stuff like that. But, you know, to each his own. And again, this isn't my list. I just find it interesting. Number 4, Poor Twisted Me. Unload. The band has a certain maturity that allows them to make good songs, although not with the energy and speed of yesteryear. Yesteryear. It was a few years separated. It's yesteryear now. You can see that the maturity in the songwriting lyrics. Until It Sleeps, Hero of the Day, The Outlaw Torn are good examples of this. On the other hand, Poor Twisted Me seems like something that started out as a good idea but never really turned into a good song. It is simply a weak song. Load does have some truly excellent moments, as does Reloaded, actually. But songs like this waters down the record. There is also the fact that it feels like a half-baked idea. Several tracks during this band's era have that feeling, sadly enough. That is why it is included among the worst Metallica songs. And I think this isn't a fresh take. This is an old take of mine, but I think it's an old take of a lot of people, which is if Metallica had a good A&R guy and sat down with all the songs from Load and Reload, they could have probably made one epic hell of an album. Suicide and Redemption. Talking about the Call of Cthulhu or Orion is talking about some of the best instrumentals of the genre. They are songs that, without being excessively long, are a kind of journey with higher and lower moments, some faster and some more melodic. That epicness that these instrumentals have is what Suicide and Redemption honestly lacks. Perhaps the best way to describe one of the worst Metallica songs in the world is bland. Suicide and Redemption lacks those elements that make it an instrumental of really quality. It's a very good example of how a song in this band's repertoire doesn't live up to their legacy. And we move on to the song All Within My Hands, of course, from the aforementioned abysmal, apocalyptically bad Saint Anger. For whatever reason, we're back to Saint Anger on this list. We've already talked about some of the things that were criticized, and almost all of them can be found in All Within My Hands. But it's not just that, since we have to add another element, Hetfield's vocals. Metallica's lead singer has never been a particularly virtuosic singer. However, in this song, Hetfield didn't even seem to be in tune. Although it's also true that the song didn't seem to have a very defined structure or style, and that affected Hetfield's vocals, which were very, well, invariable. You know, they were not good. There was no consistency. It is definitely one of the weakest performances in his career on one of the worst Metallica albums ever, on one of the worst Metallica songs to date. We move on to the song Attitude from Reload. Legend has it that both Load and Reload had a lot of material that, at another time in the band's history, would have been discarded. We're talking about songs that wouldn't pass the band's standard filter. If we look at both albums in detail, well, they have many more songs than the rest of Metallica's discography. In that lack of discard, songs like Attitude make it onto Reload, which in itself is not one of the band's strongest albums. So it's a poor song on an album with so much good material. And like I said before, I mean, if they would have just weeded through, they could have made a tremendously good album that I think would stand up to this day. The Struggle Within. See, I totally don't agree with this assessment. The Struggle Within seemed like an attempt to go back to sounding like they did at the beginning of their career. Clearly, it wasn't a successful attempt. I don't agree with that at all. Not at all. In fact, we could say that both in the song and much more, the Black Album, they were moving away from that. The song ends up being somewhat weak and bland. It lacks things to catch the band's fanatic attention. Logically, it couldn't be left out of the list of the worst Metallica songs. Yeah, it could. And it's not like I even have like a lot of love for the Black Album, but the only thing The Struggle Within doesn't have that the majority of the other songs have is that hook. Ultimately, The Struggle Within feels like an afterthought. Despite being the band's highest selling record, this song doesn't stand out. It feels like a missed opportunity from a songwriting perspective. It is not that the band's classic, it's not their classic thrash metal style, it's not their new heavy metal style. It doesn't have a commercial or melodic appeal of the new sound. It's just bleh. It feels like an undeveloped idea, which was probably a sign of things to come, because we know what came next. Another song that should have been left off the Load album is Ronnie. Another undeveloped idea, perhaps with a little more dedication, could have reached some level of at least acceptable. We could say that one of Hetfield's strong points is his riffs, and Ronnie has one of the worst in the band's discography, a song that you can skip if you like Metallica. It is also another song that should have been left off Load. Perhaps the biggest problem with this song, as mentioned earlier, is that it is underdeveloped. This is an issue with the vast majority of the Load, the Reload, Saint Anger, Hardwired to Self-Destruct, Death Magnetic, really anything after Injustice for All. Where was I? Oh yeah, this is an issue with the vast majority of the Load or Reload productions. As I said before, it makes sense that Lars and James don't like wasting ideas. It's an understandable decision, but this song is a prime example that it just should have stayed in the studio, maybe been left for later. The Unforgiven III off the album I just mentioned, Death Magnetic. It's not easy to write the Unforgiving along the worst Metallica songs, but it is what it is, and it's not the Unforgiven, it's the Unforgiven 3. The first two, and especially the first one, are important songs in the band discography. Even though they break considerably with the band's classic style, it has become iconic. It's also that this song tries to replicate the style of the previous ones, although with a Metallica version that is very different. Hetfield's vocals don't provide the strength that the previous ones had. The third part falls into no man's land, and the name ends up being what condemns it. Perhaps leaving the Unforgiven as a two-part song would have been better. There's also the fact that there is always going to be the comparison with the first two songs, and especially the aforementioned first one, is something that can't be avoided and also feels like a weak part of the Death Magnetic album. So those are the 10 songs that, at least in this article, are considered the worst Metallica songs ever made. Like I said, I don't necessarily agree with all of them, but I thought the article would be interesting. I hope you found it interesting, and I will see you in the next video. Later.